These women are completely out of touch with reality. And you're right, ABC should wake up. They likened President Trump to Hitler. They have mocked him. They have shamed him. They have lied about him consistently on their show.
Karoline Leavitt. That name alone has been stirring up fiery debates on daytime television and across the web. Some see her as the fresh, fearless face of a changing political landscape. Others call her a novice, using looks and luck to climb the ranks. Whatever your opinion, there's no denying she has rocked The View to its core, igniting a media storm that reveals just how fragile the old guard's power might be. You've probably heard the headlines. A 27-year-old becomes White House press secretary, then tangles with Joy B and the other co-hosts of one of the most influential talk shows around. It sounds like a plot twist nobody saw coming. But here's the truth. It's not just about what was said on live TV. It's about a much bigger shift in how information is shaped, shared, and scrutinized. If you want to see where the future of political dialogue is headed and how a single viral moment can topple decades of media routine, strap in. This story is just getting started. The View might seem like a cozy forum for casual banter and celebrity interviews until a topic hits a nerve. On that particular morning, the conversation pivoted to Karoline Leavitt. The second her name was mentioned, you could sense the tension. Joy B, known for her strong opinions and unfiltered style, questioned Karoline's qualifications in a way that quickly turned personal. She implied that Donald Trump had chosen Leavitt purely for her appearance, brushing aside any notion that Leavitt might have earned the position through skill or strategy. The remark landed like a spark on dry tinder. Karoline, though not in the studio, fired back on social media soon after. She didn't mince words, accusing The View of tearing down a young conservative woman in ways they'd never do to someone on the left. As segments of the audience cheered on Joy B for calling out nepotism, others blasted her for hypocrisy. After all, The View has long portrayed itself as a champion of female empowerment. So why were they reducing Karoline Leavitt, a woman who's broken into the most competitive realm of politics, to nothing but a so-called pretty face? Within hours, clips went viral. Commentators across the political spectrum weighed in, dissecting every syllable of Joy B's comments. Some viewers said the hosts were simply exposing a hollow political appointee who'd never have been hired without a powerful endorsement. Others said it was a blatant example of The View trampling its own feminist principles. Whichever side you were on, the drama captured national attention and served as a snapshot of the complicated intersections of politics, media, and the female experience. In the immediate aftermath, Joy B's comments collided with a tidal wave of internet outrage. From Twitter threads to YouTube breakdowns, everyone had a hot take. Conservative pundits were quick to pounce, calling it further proof that the mainstream media has one standard for liberal women and another for conservatives. Their argument? If Karoline Leavitt had been a progressive figure, The View would have welcomed her with open arms, praising her as a trailblazer. More centrist voices questioned if Joy B had simply gone too far this time, especially given the show's self-declared commitment to uplifting women. Even some regular viewers of The View admitted the panel's comments felt oddly personal, focusing on Leavitt's aesthetic attributes rather than tackling any real policy concerns or job qualifications. And it didn't help that Karoline had, in fact, racked up experience in other political roles, facts that contradicted Joy B's dismissal of her professional record. Amid the fray, hashtags like Stand with Karoline gained traction. Supporters argued that the new press secretary represented exactly the kind of generational shift Washington needed. Meanwhile, critics insisted that no one should be praising Leavitt without scrutinizing the administration she serves. For The View, a show accustomed to stirring controversy, this moment escalated into a fierce debate about whether they'd become the very thing they claim to fight against, a platform that belittles women it disagrees with. If you step back and look at the bigger picture, this tussle between Karoline Leavitt and The View isn't just a one-off TV spat. It's emblematic of a broader tension in American media. For decades, powerful talk shows and leading networks shaped public perceptions with near absolute authority. They were the gatekeepers, the ones who decided which stories mattered and which figures deserved the spotlight. But times are changing, and the internet has become an explosive equalizer. That means a press secretary like Karoline, who's adept at social media and understands the power of direct engagement, can bypass mainstream filters entirely. She doesn't have to beg for an interview or rely on a favorable TV edit. She can hop on a live stream, post on Twitter, and instantly reach millions who are willing to hear her unfiltered perspective. This approach undercuts the influence of talk show panels and editorial boards that once dominated the airwaves. Karoline's ability to fire back quickly, and in her own words, left The View with less narrative control. Instead of letting the show's comments define her image, she used that moment to highlight what she calls a media double standard. That phrase, media double standard, resonates deeply with many viewers who have grown skeptical of mainstream outlets. They see a pattern. Liberal figures tend to receive softer coverage, while conservative personalities are put through the ringer, sometimes on issues that seem peripheral or shallow. So this isn't just a drama about whether a talk show host dissed a young press secretary. It's a microcosm of the power struggle between legacy media and emerging voices, each claiming to represent real people. And as public trust in traditional outlets continues to wane, every skirmish like this chips away at their perceived authority. In the midst of all this chaos, Karoline Leavitt made a game-changing move at the White House. She announced a significant overhaul of press briefing policies, an overhaul that had legacy outlets reeling. For decades, only a select group of vetted journalists held those coveted front-row seats. Over time, these seats became symbols of mainstream approval and influence. But Karoline decided to shake things up, declaring that a portion of those seats would go to independent reporters and up-and-coming media voices who had been blocked or sidelined before. While some saw this as a visionary step toward media transparency, others viewed it as a blatant tactic to saturate the briefing room with friendly questioners. The View, unsurprisingly, saw plenty to criticize, questioning the credentials of these new invitees. Their stance was straightforward. "We need professional standards," they said. "We can't just let anyone walk in and claim to be legitimate press." But critics of The View responded in force, accusing the show of elitism and gatekeeping, especially since many mainstream outlets have lost public trust in recent years due to perceived biases and sensationalism. Yet the biggest news came when Karoline Leavitt restored press passes to hundreds of journalists whose credentials had been revoked under the previous administration. The symbolic weight of that action was huge. For supporters, it was an unmistakable sign that the days of tight media control were over. For skeptics, it only confirmed their suspicions that the White House wanted to fill the room with yes men and cheerleaders. But what neither side could deny is that the balance of power was shifting. No longer did a small group of network heads and senior correspondents hold all the keys to White House coverage. A key flashpoint in this ongoing drama is the debate over identity politics. The View has long championed the idea that representation matters, often celebrating each new first to hold a major role, be it the first woman, the first person of color, the first LGBTQ+ individual, and so on. Karoline Leavitt, on the other hand, has made it clear that while representation can be meaningful, it should never eclipse competence or policy expertise. This difference in emphasis has fueled some of the show's harshest criticisms of Karoline. Hosts argued that if she truly believed in diverse representation, she'd appreciate how wokeness has helped historically marginalized groups gain public roles. Karoline fired back, questioning whether modern wokeness is actually about inclusivity or simply about enforcing a specific ideological consensus. From her perspective, the problem arises when institutions prioritize identity labels over qualifications. She cited examples of politicians whose credentials took a backseat to the symbolic weight of their appointments. Meanwhile, The View insisted that acknowledging a person's identity is crucial for tearing down systemic barriers. It's a philosophical disagreement that touches on everything from hiring practices to policymaking. But in the court of public opinion, many viewers are left wondering, can we celebrate progress while also insisting on rigorous standards of competence? And why does The View seem unwilling to extend that celebration to a young conservative woman breaking barriers in her own way? One of the most dramatic on-air moments came when The View shifted gears to talk about immigration. The hosts brought up the recent IC arrests under the resumed Trump administration, implying that the policies were unreasonably harsh. They framed it as proof that this White House cared more about deportation numbers than humane policy solutions. It was a classic gotcha question, one that often sends administration spokespeople fumbling for talking points. But Karoline was prepared. She pointed out that these arrests weren't some unprecedented crackdown. They were simply the enforcement of already established laws regarding illegal entry. She invited the hosts to debate the laws themselves rather than painting the enforcement as an extreme measure. The moment was revealing. Instead of cornering Karoline into admitting to cruelty or incompetence, the show ended up exposing a gap in its own argument. If the law states that unlawful entry carries certain consequences, then the debate should center on whether those laws need changing, not on the idea that this administration invented them out of thin air. For a brief second, The View's panel seemed unsure how to respond. So they pivoted, changing the subject to broader cultural sensitivities and the need for compassion. Karoline, however, stuck to her guns, suggesting that conflating law enforcement with heartlessness trivializes the real human implications. In doing so, she deftly sidestepped their trap and, in the eyes of her supporters, demonstrated the hypocrisy of a media that screams women's empowerment, but balks when an empowered conservative woman stands her ground. Karoline Leavitt's firm stance against The View's critiques is more than personal bravado. It signals a new era of accountability for mainstream media. Over the past several years, trust in legacy outlets has steadily declined, with many Americans feeling they aren't getting the full story or an unbiased perspective. Karoline's callouts resonate with viewers who have grown tired of what they see as a one-sided narrative that disproportionately favors liberal viewpoints. And she's not alone in this quest. More politicians and public figures on both sides of the aisle are starting to bypass the conventional media circuit, opting for direct-to-audience platforms like YouTube, podcasts, and Twitter Spaces. This shift enables them to present their arguments without worrying about clipped quotes or panelist interruptions. For The View, one of the flagship shows in daytime discussion, this trend is unsettling. They've long enjoyed a status as cultural commentators who mix pop culture with politics, shaping opinions in the process. Now that influence seems shaky. Critics of The View say that the show's hosts are so used to controlling the dialogue that they never expected someone like Karoline to respond quickly and effectively. Instead of a young political novice folding under the bright lights, they found an articulate adversary who wasn't afraid to highlight inconsistencies. And if her success in pushing back is any indicator, we may soon see more and more rising stars calling out established hosts for alleged misrepresentations or outright biases. Despite the uproar, neither side is backing down. Karoline Leavitt continues to present herself as a truth teller who refuses to be cowed by media elites. She's doubled down on her critiques of The View, asserting that its hosts have, at times, abandoned their feminist principles to score quick political points. The View, meanwhile, stands by its criticisms, insisting that scrutinizing a young, high-profile appointee is essential for public accountability. The result is an impasse that captures a much larger cultural moment. Traditional media outlets are seeing their once unquestioned authority challenged by confident new players. Karoline's approach to the press, openly calling out what she considers bias and misinformation, troubles many longtime journalists who say it erodes the line between fact-based reporting and partisan spin. Yet to her supporters, she's merely leveling the playing field, ensuring that mainstream hosts and correspondents don't get a free pass to frame the narrative however they choose. What emerges is an existential question for shows like The View. Can they adapt to a world where guests and subjects have robust platforms of their own to launch counter-narratives? Do they risk appearing out of touch if they dismiss or denigrate every conservative figure who doesn't fit their mold? These questions aren't just theoretical. They cut to the heart of how Americans decide what to believe and who they trust to deliver the truth. Karoline Leavitt's clash with The View is about more than a single talk show segment or a few fiery comments. It reflects a sea change in who holds the microphone in American discourse. For ages, daytime TV and big network pundits enjoyed something close to unquestioned influence. Now, rising figures like Karoline are pulling back the curtain, challenging established hosts on points of bias, policy, and personal slander. This battle raises a critical question. Are we witnessing a permanent decline in mainstream media's power to shape the conversation? Or will these legacy outlets adapt, solidify alliances with emerging platforms, and find new ways to maintain their edge? One thing is certain, viewers have become more vocal, more skeptical, and more willing to seek alternative sources of information. That means the comfortable status quo, where a handful of hosts could effectively dictate the national narrative, might be over. Think about it. If a 27-year-old press secretary can rattle an institution like The View simply by speaking up and using her own channels of communication, imagine how many more voices will follow. Whether you side with Karoline, The View, or neither, you can't ignore the shifting media landscape that's been laid bare by their dispute. It might just be a talk show on the surface, but the deeper fault lines run through every story you'll see on your screen tomorrow. Where do you stand on this evolving dynamic? Share your thoughts below. Hit that like button if this breakdown gave you a new perspective, and don't forget to subscribe for more in-depth analysis. This story is far from over. In fact, it might just be the opening chapter in a new age of media, and you won't want to miss what comes next.